Season 2's been and gone, so it's time to make one of these and upset people who were expecting an episode video. The story so far. Benny Sisko and his band of Starfleet have been involved in Bajoran political machinations, despite this being against the rule that they all swore they'd literally die before they break. When faced with orders to remove themselves from a civil war, he chose to ignore it and do the opposite. The uprising was caused by an external power, of course, so maybe he was testing that old saying about two wrongs not making a right. Perhaps the experience taught him to stay out of things where possible, hence him steering clear of the power struggle for a new religious leader. Or maybe he'd had his fill of politics altogether, dealing with the fallout from a treaty that resulted in a number of Federation colonies being on the wrong side of the Cardigan border was not much fun. They say a change is as good as a rest, though, so the universe decided to give him problems from a new direction with the Dominion. At least an all-conquering coalition of powers puts his other problems into perspective. Time to have a look at how the season has treated our principal characters. Sisko spent most of his time on the station stopping nefarious plots by enemies near and far. In between stopping a Bajoran coup d'etat and some unpleasantness in the demilitarized zone, he's not had time to do much else. Perhaps that's for the best, as the times when he's not been dealing with politics have gone far worse for him. Falling in love sounds great on paper, but nothing is that simple on Deep Space Nine, and the object of his affections turned out to be the subconscious psychic projection of a married woman. He also spent a few days in a shit sauna on the planet of the Amish, tortured by the leader of definitely not a cult. You'd think the experience would put him off visiting new planets, but he did it again at the end of the season, and has brought the threat of a bloody great big war with him. When you step back and look at it all, you could be forgiven for thinking the guy is cursed. Kira's had a fair bit to do this year, which is ironic when you consider she also lost her job. Would she have got it back if the new guy hadn't carked it? Who knows? One thing we do know is her time down on the surface of Bajor contributed to her eventual relationship with Vedek Bareil. Of course, some of that was also due to the orb vision glimpses they were both given, and we definitely shouldn't question whether they did sexy times because some revered wormhole aliens told them to, and the implications of that if they did. We also learned in Necessary Evil that she's capable of straight-up getting away with murder, and in Crossover that another version of herself actively enjoys it. All those casual threats to Quark may not be so casual. Jadzia's had some problems this season, and they've all been related to her belly worm. That's a shame in a way, as it risks making her a one-note character, but at least the bits we got were sufficiently interesting. Invasive Procedures and Playing God explore the societal impact of symbiotic union on the host race, both in how revered the process has become, and with what happens to those who get rejected. Blood Oath was another story of a past experience coming back to bollocks up her present. The second example of such an event might not sound like much on paper, but for a people who have strict rules regarding new lives being separate from the old, it's still a lot. Bashir's done a bit of growing up this season and isn't quite as insufferable as he started out. Of course, he also fucked a patient, so, swings and roundabouts. After being done dirty with last season's stinker, Bashir has had far more luck this time round. Rivals and Armageddon Game helped make him more relatable to both O'Brien and we viewers. More notable, though, is him being central to this season's highlight in The Wire, showing us the start of a more genuine friendship with plain simple Garak. Well, insomuch as anything is genuine with somebody who's allergic to the truth. You're a lad hard done by, aren't you, O'Brien? Infected with a megavirus, cloned to become a spy, and kidnapped for a propaganda show trial. There must be days when he wishes he was still just stuck in a teleporter room on the Enterprise. It's unsurprising, then, that poor O'Brien becomes the first core character to have an alternate version cark it on the show, killing off variants being something Trek occasionally does for the lols. This season was particularly harsh on that score, as we had Clone O'Brien die along with Mirror Quark and Mirror Odo. Most notable for O'Brien this season, perhaps, is something that made him more real to us: his pride. Getting proper pissed off at losing games to Bashir showed us a side that could have been negative had it not been played in a self-deprecating manner. The result was instead a microcosm of someone struggling to come to terms with aging and still making the moral choice when given the chance for an undeserved victory. This relatively simple side plot to somebody else's story is what I'll remember when I think about how O'Brien was defined in Season 2. A couple of dips into Odo's past this season. The first was an exploration of how he became the security guy for Terok Nor and thus Deep Space Nine, a position that also served to cement his status as an outsider to all. The second gave us glimpses of his early life as an object of curiosity and amusement. This, and the complicated relationship with his not-dad, explains much of why he chooses to stay aloof. How much of that behaviour is what he actually wants is another matter, as we also got strong hints that his friendship with Kira may not be as simple as she thinks. A mixed bag for Quark this season. Rules of Acquisition gave him a credible love interest intertwined with the complications of Ferengi society, and the first nods towards where the season as a whole was going to boot. Other appearances weren't so kind. Rivals falls pretty flat, albeit through no fault of Armin Shimmerman. The idea of having some competition is a pretty good one on paper, but we largely fail to pull it off. More interplay between the two of them might have improved things slightly, but I still maintain the casting for his rival was a poor fit. The last focus on him was in Profit and Loss, a poor man's Casablanca with Quark cast as Humphrey Bogart. The complete change of pace for the character was as bad an idea as it sounds, and was, for me, one of this season's low points. Jake's not had a lot going on this season, generally staying out of the way when the show needs him gone so they can do action stuff. Most of his appearances have been to reinforce his friendship with Eggnog, though we did also see him deal with telling his dad that he wasn't interested in joining Starfleet. Having a teen be part of the main cast was a brave choice to begin with, so seeing them struggle with how to use the character while the show's still finding its feet is understandable, and at least they've already made him more interesting than Harry Kim. Season 2 is where we really start to see glimpses of the Federation's underbelly. Their abandonment of Federation citizens in the demilitarized zone shows an organization that struggles to adapt to situations it can't solve through force or science. Redrawing borders might be the logical choice, but telling people that they're no longer in Federation space after years of making it their home isn't a logic problem. In a society without scarcity, it's understandable that people defining themselves by personal achievements will lead to stronger associations with those achievements. Being told they have to start over because a diplomat gave away their home is not a matter of property or wealth. These people already declined an opportunity to have an easy life when they chose to become settlers. That simply isn't what drives them. Offering the same again whilst also telling them they've pissed away years was never going to achieve the desired result, and the Federation's inability to see this or unwillingness to find a different solution is indicative that certain segments of their society are not as understood or catered to as others. That lean towards the darker aspects is maintained with stories that have no real right answer. Sanctuary saw Bashir reject the settlement of people seeking asylum, unwilling to gamble with the possibility of those settlements failing and requiring assistance. There are valid arguments for both sides of the debate, and no clean solution that pleases everyone. That willingness to provide unhappy endings is seen in other episodes too, a refreshing change to a formula that sometimes risks becoming a pantomime of heroic heroes triumphing over villainous villains. And that darkness is here to stay. We're in the process of unveiling Deep Space Nine's big bad, as well as dealing with the political fallout of a massive arsehole wielding power on Bashir in the form of Kai Sin, the Delphic douchebag. Things are only going to get worse from here on out, but at least they'll be entertaining, and that's what's important. Once again, your thanks should be thrown at the names currently ascending to the Celestial Temple on the side of the screen. If these collections of screenshots and nonsense have been of entertainment to you, it's largely down to them, as they're the people who fund it all. If you'd like to join them and become the newest members of the Patreon Dominion, there'll be a link on the screen, at some point, probably. The generous donations of kind souls are how we keep this shambles of a channel running, and it's the only thing coming between me and having to get a real job, so, maybe do that if you've got a quid to spare. To all those still watching, thank you for choosing to lend me your eyeballs twice a week. I know there are other, frankly much better options available, so your choice to slum it with the rest of us spicy-brained scumbags is very welcome indeed. End of summary.